everyone, this is Jane with Barlow Herbal, and happy Sunday, February 18th of 2024. Now, it's been a busy week, a good week, an interesting week. Again, for me and probably for many of you, sometimes an emotional roller coaster. And I think that it's really normal for the times we're going in, but as I've been kind of talking about these last few weeks especially, is raising our levels of consciousness to get us through. Now, I've been rereading all my favorite Dr. David Hawkins books, and this week I actually picked up on Audible a book I read a long time ago that was definitely overdue, called Healing and Recovery. Now, this is a stunning book, and I decided I'm going to just kind of focus on one chapter on health and how we experience health and how it relates to the energy of the consciousness states that we're in. And I have some great examples and some great things to share with you today. One of the very first things I wanted to kind of comment on is there was an email or a comment on last week's video, and I want to read this to you and then I want to comment on it, because I think that this is a really good way for us to share with each other, and maybe this is a good way for me to put my perspective on some of the comments that you guys leave for me that might be and need a little bit more digging into than just a quick comment back. So here's the comment. I very much enjoyed this video. Thank you. I do find letting go and surrendering the ego one of the most difficult things to master. I think we all do, right? It seems they are an intrinsic part of being human, but I'm working on it. I have a question and would love to hear your opinion with regards to what has been happening in the world since 2020. I am struggling so much to keep my fears at bay about the future and dark agendas. I feel I have a duty to open other people's eyes to the developments and dangers, especially in the public health context. However, I also hear often that it's not my job to awaken others, and that what happens needs to happen, etc. With everything you said about surrendering, does this mean I should stop trying to tell my family and friends about what is really happening out there? Not that they're willing to listen with their eyes. Isn't this defeatist somehow? I go crazy seeing most people going about their lives in blissful ignorance. Don't I need to do my utmost to tell the truth? Although, as I said, no one seems to care. So let me tell you, this was a very good comment, and I think all the comments that I get underneath my videos are really, you guys are a lot of really thoughtful, deep-minded, like-minded people. And what I would say about this is, first of all, I can relate to this 100%. I have felt the same. I still have very close family members who, and not saying this in a negative way, but I would consider them still to be asleep and in blissful ignorance. And I've even had one person in particular, who's a very close family member, tell me that they would rather keep their head in the sand, that they don't want to know. And because I've also felt like it's my job to awaken people. And then what I realized on a pretty deep level is that my biggest impact is in the way that I set an example. And it's like that with everything I've ever done in my life. I find that if I stick to a clean eating routine and I exercise every day, I don't try to harass the people in my life that are close to me that I know would benefit from these things by harassing them. When you set this beautiful, pure example of what life looks like when you take the steps to take care of your physical body, for example, then people can come along or they don't. I do think that with everything that's going on, and those of us who've seen it since the beginning, or maybe we've had an awakening on a higher level since the beginning of 2020, I do believe that there are still some things that we need to say in not an aggressive way. And I've found that sometimes it's just in making a comment to a conversation that's happening. I'll just insert my comment in a very non-aggressive way, but well, here's my perspective on that, and then I leave it, or I expand on it if that flows into the conversation and people are interested. And I'm finding that people are becoming more and more interested in the things that I might have to say that maybe went against the things they believe in. To me, that's where the changes happen now. Now, I do believe that we are on a trajectory where there is going to reach a point where everyone will have to awaken to the truth. And I think those of us who have been on this awakening path, who've seen things since the beginning, and for me, this was the way I was raised. I was raised with a serious skepticism for the government, for the systems, for everything. I was always taught to question it, and I wasn't taught to like break the law and go take the law into your own hands and all that stuff. But I was always taught to have a healthy skepticism of these systems, and I've done my best to live in them, comply with them, because we do have to live in a society with all these things that feel like they constrain us, but then we can be outside of it as well. And that's the stance I've taken when it comes to taking care of my health. I don't want to be part of the medical system. I do think that you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like a year and a half ago, I had a full knee surgery, and it was interesting to navigate because I find myself in a place of almost revulsion for the medical industry and the way that it does not promote health. That it was a very interesting thing for me to first find the right surgeon, and because I think I talked to 3 or 4 surgeons before I landed on the one that actually did my surgery. And this is too where we have to be willing to put in the due diligence. We have to find the person that we energetically resonate with, especially if we're going to be doing something big, like some big surgery or something. Or someone's, if you're in a place where you need trauma care, you might not be in a position to do due diligence and find the person who's going to maybe save your life or the life of your loved one. So there has to be layers of responsibility and common sense that come along with all of this. So what I wanted to really talk about today was our ability to experience either vibrant health in this life with this physical body, or how our negative thought patterns and emotions can affect our health on the opposite way, as far as disease and chronic pain and things like that. So I wrote down a few things that I just kind of wanted to expand on, and I think it should be a very interesting conversation where I'd love to hear what your thoughts are as I go through some of these things. So this is one thing that really stuck out in this book. Now I'm really focusing on chapter 4 in health and recovery. This is the name of the book by Dr. Hawkins. He was very prolific. Some of the stories that he tells and his experiences, I would have loved to meet this human being. In fact, I think it was Fane, if you're watching this, you're the one who told me that you actually got to meet him and you heard him speak, which that's one of those things that person is, in my mind, what you would consider a celebrity. The celebrities, the Hollywoods, the singers, all the actors. Those people, okay, they might entertain us, but that has really lost its glisten for me on every level. I was kind of never really a fan of the Hollywood scene and what they're doing in their private lives, but these last few years in particular, I really am not starstruck by anyone, except for maybe someone like Dr. David Hawkins, who is physically not here anymore, but thankfully, luckily, he left a lot of very deep work that it continues to help humanity. So this is something that he wrote in chapter 4. The body has no way of experiencing itself. The body is experienced in mind only. That like jumped out at me. The body expresses that in which is held in mind. The mind cannot experience itself either. It has to be experienced from an even greater energy field called consciousness, okay? And the field called awareness. So, if you really think about that, like this made me pause. I had to pause, write that down, and really, really think about that. What does that mean when we say the body has no way of experiencing itself? Everything we experience in the body is experienced through the mind, But then again, not even through the mind, it's through that greater energy field of consciousness, which brings us awareness. I mean, I found that to be so beautiful. So the relationship between body, mind, and spirit when considering the subject of health is of utmost importance. And we've heard this for a long time now, that it's not just what our body expresses, it's body, mind, and spirit, right? All experiencing is going on solely in the consciousness. So these are some big statements, because it's like, well, what if I have this physical pain? I develop this disease. I have sleep issues. I have inflammation. I have, IBS. I have heart disease. All the things that we develop and that we express, there is solid evidence from many different studies that show that these are experienced in our mind, and our body expresses what our mind believes. So due to the power of the energy fields, healing comes out of attitudes and belief systems that are held in the mind. To a large degree, health is the expression of levels of consciousness. Think about, a good example is Anita Moorjani, who wrote a book called Dying to Be Me. And many of you might be familiar with her. Her story is powerful. She's now she had a near-death experience. Her body was riddled with cancer, and she was in the hospital. She went into a coma, and basically they pronounced her dead. She was like 80 pounds, and she had lemon-sized tumors all over her body. And when her spirit, her consciousness left her body, she had an absolute opening of the truth of why her body created cancer. And if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. It's a beautiful little read. It's not a big, thick book, but it is very powerful. And she had an opportunity at a certain point to go back into her body and live her life. Her body was still viable. And she made the decision to go back. And within 5 weeks, I believe it was, her tumors all shrunk. They didn't do any treatments during that time. And she left the hospital completely cancer-free without any treatments, but what she knew to be true. And she explains that as a young adult, even as a teenager, she believed that cancer was going to come and get her. And cancer was going to be, she had a good girlfriend who died of some type of cancer. I think her father passed away from some type of cancer. So she had this massive fear around the energy of cancer. And we all, know to a certain level deep within who we truly are, that our body expresses what we believe. It can express good health. It can express poor health. It can express ups and downs where we understand what's happening, and then we kind of maybe lift ourselves up out of it and we experience vibrant health. So Anita Moorjani is just one of those people. Now, negative levels of emotion will accompany ill health, while higher levels of emotion will accompany good health. So there's also the stories of course, Dr. Joe Dispenza. He has an absolute amazing story of healing from a car accident. I believe, I don't know if it was a motorcycle or it was some vehicle accident. And they told him he would never walk again. And he proceeded to mentally and from his higher consciousness state, mend and heal all the bones that were broken in his back. And I don't know if I have that story exactly right, but I love Joe Dispenza. I've been following him for a long, long time. That could probably be a story I could revisit just to get the exact details right. But he's one of those people that has gone on to make a huge impact in the world. And then, of course, we know Louise Hay, who has now passed on, but she wrote a very famous book, I believe, called You Can Heal Yourself. And she actually correlates the different diseases and different parts of our body that have problems with different emotions. And different things that are happening in our physical lives express in disease in our physical body. So higher states of consciousness can positively influence the body's ability to heal. That one is, it's been shown so many times. In fact, I have a couple of examples. So health can be viewed as the expression of unopposed aliveness resulting from its removal of its obstacles. So health can be viewed as the expression of unopposed aliveness resulting from its removal of obstacles. When we remove the obstacles, and this is a direct quote from Dr. Hawkins' book. So health results from transcending limitations and feelings of separation. I think that that's one of the biggest misconceptions that we have as human beings on this planet, or just soul, spirit, the consciousness that we are. We believe we're separate, and we're not. We are so connected. We're not just connected to each other. We are connected into the energy field. We're connected to God, to Source, to our Creator. We are connected. And our biggest misconception when it comes to creating vibrant health is the idea that we are separate. Separate from God, separate from our neighbor, separate. We're not. We're so not. Since we have the power of refusal, we can refuse things that are negative. Okay? So think about this. All of the programming that we've had from when we were young, of all the stuff, not just from the people in our lives that we hear, but the programs, the podcasts, everything that we let into our innocence as a child comes in and forms all these negative belief systems. So if we can create and be programmed to have these negative belief systems that affect our health in a negative way and all the other parts of our life, we can certainly program ourselves into the positive. If our minds can be programmed in the negative, we can choose to program our minds in a positive direction. So this is where it takes practice and it takes work. We just have to make a conscious effort to practice getting ourselves in a positive direction of letting ourselves vibrate in that as often as we can. I think that this is one of the things about this chapter that really struck me is we have the ability to reprogram ourselves, and it's more powerful than we know. So health is an expression of self-esteem. I love that. Health is an expression of self-esteem. So then we ask ourselves these questions. How do we learn to love ourselves, our real self? How is our body experienced? Like I said, I think I said this last week when I called this a meat suit. This is not who we are. This is how we get to come into this lifetime and experience. Our consciousness gets to experience the physicality of being in this body. And we get to choose how healthy we are. In fact, if you think about it, there's all the people in all of the world that have been studied for their longevity. If you think about the blue zones where there's pockets of people where they study them for longevity. And why do they live so long? Why are they so healthy? And it's a lot of times there are factors like taking care of the physical body, but you hear people who smoke a cigar and drink a glass of alcohol every day, and they live to be 110, or they live to be 100 and 105, 90, 98, whatever. And what they found is that while it is important to take care of this physical body, the number one most important thing are your social connections and your purpose in life. When you have purpose and when you are living in higher states of consciousness, like unconditional love, joy, forgiveness, all of these levels that resonate very high, then you know you have purpose. And if you think about it, if you walk down the street and everything you see you feel like is negative, the world's too crowded, the streets are too dirty, oh, these poor kids are growing up in a horrible world to be born into, this is going to be the expression of your life and the physical health that you're going to have based on how you view the world. And because you could start to reprogram those, and you could actually put a very positive spin on it. You could see the kids and you would be, find joy in them playing in the park. You could look at if a street has full of litter, you could grab a bag and clean it up and feel joy in doing that. I shared before, I have a sister in Southern California who takes a small garbage bag with her every time she goes on a walk, not just in her neighborhood, but on some of the hikes that she goes on. And I actually do this when I go hiking in the mountains here. The mountains here in Utah are actually very well taken care of. I do see a lot of people not just not littering, but I also see people doing the same thing I do. If they see some, a water bottle or a piece of trash on the trail, it's always picked up and tucked into a backpack. There's always a way to make a better spin. So the three questions: how do we learn to love our real self? How is the body experienced? And how is one's relationship with that body? Do you kind of have a love-hate relationship with your body? Maybe it's all hate. You don't like the way you look. You don't like the way you don't like your weight. You don't like the size of your feet. You don't like the size of your nose. You think your hair's too thin. You think your hair's too thick. What is your relationship with this physical body that is really not you, right? It's a crazy thing to think about. So this is something, I'm not going to expand on this next one very much because this one really felt really deep to me, and I might expand on it in another one, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So there is a sublime state called non-experiencing the body, in which the body is barely experienced as even existing. Now you think about someone like Eckhart Tolle, who I remember when I first read his book, A New Earth, and I remember him describing sitting on a park bench and sitting there for hours and hours and days and weeks. And he just sat there experiencing utter bliss. And it wasn't his body experiencing the bliss, it was his consciousness experiencing the utter bliss of listening to the birds and the rustle of the trees and the movement of the other human beings. And this to me was the best way that I could think of my brain what that means. So it means letting go of identifying oneself as a physicality. This is, we fully in this world, and we're conditioned, we're programmed, we're encouraged to identify as our body. Sometimes we look at other people and we judge them for the way they look, if they have raggedy clothes, or if they're too thin, or if they're a little overweight, or if they wear a funny outfit, or if they don't drive a nice car, or there's an intense identifying with the physicality of our body. And it's interesting when you think about letting go of that. It means letting go of identifying oneself as a physicality. We move up the scale of consciousness and realize that we are spirit. When we realize that, it moves us up the scale of consciousness, and it can move us quite quickly. And this does take practice. One of the things that I read in this book this week was where he talks about literally when you feel the emotion of fear, a situation comes up where you feel fear, sit with it for a minute. It's like releasing a pressure valve, because when you feel fear and you lash out, or your body starts to express illness, let the feeling of fear be with you for a minute. Instead of stuffing it down, instead of doing something to distract yourself, I think that when we sit with these feelings and we realize they're just feelings, it has really nothing to do with any situation going on. I will tell you, this has been really pivotal for me while I'm going through what I'm going through in my business. And I'm not succeeding at it as much as I'd like, but I am definitely succeeding at it. I will tell you that Dr. Hawkins' work has been the exact right thing for me to turn to, because it's been a reminder of, I've had a couple of intense relationships with people that are close to me the last few years, and then this situation with my business hit, and it washed intense anxiety and fear over me. And what I realized as I worked through this with a lot less grace than I would like to be considered having, I realized that it was providing me a pressure valve to not just let out the fear of what could happen, what might happen, what I perceive will happen, but also the intense emotions of fear and anger that I stuffed down about these family members and my interaction with them, my whatever. So he actually talks about that, is like, let yourself be with it, because it's giving you a gift. it's giving you the ability to let this stuff out. And I will tell you, this is where the journal comes in, because when you are ready and willing to sit down and express your feelings and get these things off your chest and realize they're just feelings, they're just emotions, all these things that we fear are created in our mind, then we're able to actually just say, okay, what is the worst thing that can happen? In fact, this is a really good exercise that leads you all the way to you being in your coffin. So ask yourself, in any situation, what's the worst thing that can happen? Okay, I have to stop doing this. Okay, what's the worst thing that can happen if you have to stop doing that thing? Well, then this thing happens. Okay, if that thing happens, then what's the worst thing that can happen out of that? And you literally take yourself all the way to where, what's the worst thing that could happen? You no longer are alive. You are now, I'm not really expressing this exactly like I want to, because it's not about taking yourself through this exercise to where you actually end up dead. This is not exactly what I'm talking about. But if you think about taking yourself all the way to what's the worst that can happen, you eventually run out of steam in that thing. And I think what this all really leads us to is we're all afraid of death, and to me that should be one of the things that we work really hard on releasing, because I remember when my mom passed away. She actually had MS for 46 years. The last 10 years of her life, the quality was quite poor. She lived in an assisted living. We weren't able to physically take care of her, but of course we were always there with her and visiting her and making sure she was taken care of. But one of the things that really plagued her, especially the last few years, was the fear of pain, because she was in constant chronic pain, and then the fear of the pain of death, especially in the last few hours of her life. That was what she was most afraid of. And if you've listened to anything by Dr. Zach Bush, where he talks about his experience as a hospice care, it's quite fascinating that we really numb people out with medications to get them out of pain, but we're almost taking them out of the bliss of being able to of going in between worlds, of transitioning our consciousness out of this physical body into the realization of the eternal beings that we are. And it's a really beautiful exercise to do, as far as what is the worst thing that can happen in this situation. And then it really deflates all of these emotions of fear and anger and shame and guilt and all of those. It literally takes those and helps you diffuse them, which is very, very important in the realm of talking about health, right? Okay, so we are subject to only what we hold in mind. I wrote that a few times during this whole thing. So we are subject to what we hold in mind. The body responds to what the mind believes. Now, I made myself a little note here because I wanted to bring this up. So I've been going in my business for a little over 22 years now. My dad passed away 26, and I've been going for 22. And about 3 or 4 years in, I got a call from a man who was looking for some herbal remedies for his daughter, and her breast cancer had come back. And so he told me this story as we were talking, and this was a long time ago, so probably 17, 18 years ago. But I remember the story like it was yesterday. So he said that what happened is, when she was 9 years old, her mother died of breast cancer. And at the funeral, all the adults were saying, all the women in our family die of breast cancer, because not only had her mother passed away, but her mother's sister, her mom's mom, and the grandmother. So as this little girl is at the funeral of her mother, and she's listening to the conversations of the adults, and the adults were completely innocent in their expression of sadness for losing their family member, and not realizing what was happening and the programming that was happening with this little girl. So this gentleman told me that when he went home with his daughter, her mantra became, all the women in our family die of breast cancer. And it was her deepest fear from a very, very young age. And he told me that when she was 18 years old, she developed breast cancer and went through all the treatments, all the surgery, everything, and ended up in remission. But her mantra never changed. Her belief system was still that all the women in her family die from breast cancer. So when she was 30, her cancer came back, and at that point there was nothing that they could do. So that is when he reached out to me, and I basically, after him telling me that story, I just said, yes, I would love to help you get her on some powerful things that I know will help her biology. But what really needs to change is her belief system, because her belief system is what is creating this. And this is a really difficult thing for most humans in this modern world to wrap their heads around. I think that we're really programmed that our health issues are genetic. And I think that there's a very slim piece of a genetic component. And I even believe that if we raise our consciousness and our belief systems and we start vibrating at these high levels, that we can even overcome that. And again, this is not to discount anyone's journey on any level, because I know we all have different things that we're dealing with, and it can be very, very difficult to hear someone say, well, your belief systems are causing your disease. And this is not my intention. My intention is to let us all realize the potential and the power we have to create either really horrible illness or very, very vibrant health. We have that ability. You think about these people, like I said, in the blue zones, or just people, you might know somebody who, doesn't maybe live the most pristine lifestyle as far as what they eat and drink or how much they exercise, but they're super healthy and they're super old. I do believe, and I know a couple of people who are in that category, and they actually are super happy. They don't eat very good, they don't exercise very much, and they're healthy and they're happy. And I think that happiness plays a huge role in how healthy we are. And one thing I wanted to kind of bring up really toward the end of this is I had a bunch of studies written down about the placebo effect and how, they actually show, in fact, one of the first ones was something called Beecher's paper. It was a doctor that in 1955, he reviewed 26 clinical trials and showed that absolutely 35% of people on these 26 trials, the placebo effect was very, very strong. And they had the same outcomes as people who went through certain surgeries, through certain medical procedures, certain medications, when there was a whole group that got a placebo, and because they thought they got either the surgery, the medication, or whatever, then they believed that they were healing because they believed they got it. And so that, that was back when one of the very first studies that I could find, that this gentleman actually cited 26 clinical trials back in 1955. And there's been many, many, many more since then. But one of the things that I really wanted to bring up toward the end of this is, I've spent a lot of time the last 10 years really pointing people in the direction of the connection of the body and the mind to pain, inflammation, and even different diseases, but mostly pain. And I've interviewed the author of The Great Pain Deception 6 times over the last 10 years. And now at this point, I consider him an absolute dear, dear friend. He lives in Ohio. I actually got to meet him last summer. For the first time, we've had a lot of conversations. We text each other on a regular basis. But he is this human being who spent 30 years of his life in chronic pain, and actually got to meet a doctor named Dr. John Sarno, who was a pain surgeon, and ended up realizing that all of his patients were having physical pain because of an emotional process. And this all ties into that. When we have trauma in things, not just childhood trauma, physical trauma, but when we have emotional trauma and we stuff it down, we don't address it, we don't realize that it's causing our body to be less than healthy, it literally creates physical pain that is 100% real to distract us from the emotional pain. Because most of the time, emotional pain is much more painful than physical pain. And if any of you can relate to any of that, I would really suggest that you jump on Amazon and buy his book called The Great Pain Deception. And his name is Ozanich. I'll put a link below this video for that. I think that this is the missing puzzle piece in vibrant health, not just pain, but disease and the expression of pure, beautiful health. In fact, as I was reading this chapter, and even other parts of this book as it was going on this week, I listened to things at 1.5 speed, so I got through this book pretty quickly this week. But one of the chapters is on health and aging. And as I was listening to this chapter and making notes, I was like, okay, I am going to make the decision to stop aging. So that was kind of like, something fun to think about, because I think in the deepest part of the way we've been programmed, I don't know if we can actually allow ourselves to go there fully and never age and never, never go through this life. In fact, as I was kind of like working my mind through that and kind of laughing at myself a little bit, I thought, do you really want to live on this dense planet for a couple hundred years or whatever, your anti-aging thing is trying to do? And it was like, you know what? I will say there are days when I do get kind of tired of the denseness, the physicality of, the uncertainty that my mind plays on me and all the BS that I bring out in my mind and all the things that I create, the situations, it's an interesting path that we find ourselves on here, because to me, this, like I always say, this is the best time to be here. And I will tell you, I when I say that and I think about what is going on in my life right now, I think, okay, do you really believe that? First of all, or am I just saying that to help motivate you? No, I really believe that. And I think for me, it's a loss of control. I can't control this situation that's happening, and it's a massive uncertainty. The uncertainty of any situation is very difficult for us as human beings who are used to controlling our day, our life, our business, our families, and making sure everything is done right and we're all safe and we're used to control. And not having that is it's a really challenging thing in this world. Like I said, I've found myself in less than proud situations as far as just different responses I've had. But it's, I forgive myself quickly. I let that human in my mind, monkey mind thing, I give it grace, and then I sit with those emotions. I picture a pressure valve. Like Dr. Hawkins says, this is providing you a beautiful opportunity to release the pressure that all these negative emotions hold on us. And it lets us move into those higher states of consciousness. So, I hope that for you this week, that you're able to realize that this is just something we're experiencing. This is not who we are. We are these deep, beautiful, creative pieces of consciousness and God, and be aware of these things. That's the first step. That's a huge step if you're aware of these things. So I hope that you have a beautiful week. I'd love to hear what you think about this. I think as we delve deeper into the different realms of consciousness, because this is a focus, this has become a very important focus for me. I want to become an evolved being of light and unconditional love. And I believe that as we walk through this time and the great awakening that is happening, that more and more people are realizing that this is the way to walk through it. Set a beautiful example. Just show what that looks like, and forgive yourself when you slip up a little bit. It's okay. It's okay. So have a beautiful week, you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.